Welcome to Africa's Got. I am your host, Manina Dambell. On tonight's show, we have got an incredible African talented woman. She is a choral virtuoso. She is an activist. She is an educationist, and she represents and flies the Gambian flag all over the world. Welcome to Africa's Got, Sona Jobateh.
Many Gambians already know that my family is a griot family, and many Gambians may already know my relatives as well, especially from my grandfather being Amadou Bansang Jobateh, a well-known name in the Gambia. My father, Sanjali Jobateh, also established choral player in the Gambia as well. And so many members of my family, Musafili Jobateh also is an upper Gambian talent now in the Gambia. So it's normal, I would say, for my family to be bringing musicians, people that are going into this profession. I started from a young age, obviously mainly because of the fact that my family is musical. Everyone around me was already doing that. For me, it also became part of more of a conscious decision a little bit later in life for me. When I was in my teens, I kind of really decided that I wanted to really focus on the choral because I had other opportunities as well to pursue. So I kind of really made that conscious decision to really start focusing hard, although I was lucky to have had so much education within the family, within the tradition before then. That's really the time that the tide was turned a little bit. The choice for me was not about choral, it was actually about genre. Because at that time I was at university in London, and I started working on my own music and thinking, okay, I want to get into also, being a performer myself as my own stuff, because I was working with a lot of other sort of musical projects as well. But the challenge I had was, how do I find what's comfortable for me, and at the same time what can work? And obviously being in Europe at that time, I felt that you can't make it unless you go into probably more of the mainstream types of music. And so I kind of started going down that road, but still trying to express myself, also my genre, the music that I'm used to, which is the Mandeng style, inside that. So I actually labeled it Afro Acoustic Soul. So it kind of was soul, R&B, but it still, I couldn't take out the Afro in there, So so that was kind of my compromise. And then it was a point in time where what ended up being my guitarist for many years, actually, he was a mentor for through a lot of years, I'd say, and still to this day. His name's Derek Johnson, and he's a Jamaican guitarist in the UK. And I remember the day he just told me, like, you should just realize that everything you have, everything you want, you already have, right? You don't need to search to find a genre to fit into. You don't need to try to be something you're not. The most valuable thing you have is just what you have and who you are and the music that you are. And so you should just do that, like stop trying to fit in. And that was it. That was the start of it. That was the seed. And obviously it wasn't automatic, it wasn't overnight, but over time that just started me down that path that, okay, I'm gonna have the confidence just to do my own music. And the result of that was Fasia years later.
Were you the first female to start playing the choral within your family, or did you have other females before yourself?
I didn't see any, and I haven't seen, not from the Jobateh family. That decision actually was taken initially by my elder brother Tunde, who was also a student of my father from before I was born. When I was born, it's like, I was a younger sister, so, and he wanted to teach me as he was a student, that's kind of normal. As a student, you should train up again, to start playing with somebody that's younger than you is always a very important sort of process.
You have done so much for yourself, but the one thing that I admire about you is what you give back to the community, and especially Gambia. I've noticed that you've got this academy.
What's important about this academy is to do with education reform in Africa. It's not to do with music specifically. But obviously my home base is the Gambia, and actually even if it wasn't, the Gambia for me is such a perfect location to begin a project like this, because it's such a small country and yet it still has so many different ethnic identities, so many different ways of life. You've got the rural, you've got the urban, you've got a lot of different poverty levels, you've got all these kind of, I'd say, common themes that you will find in practically any other African country. So for me, again, the academy at the moment is about a template, setting up a template and being able to work with a certain number of students and to prove what's possible when you do reform the education. And it's always very important for me to make sure I select a cross section of kids from different backgrounds to show that, okay, it's not to do with where you come from, but to do with what you're exposed to see what difference you can make on a child's life.
So apart from being an educationist, you're also an activist. Tell us more about that.
Well, I see that very much tied up with the education. And that's, I think, my biggest campaign, when I've worked as ambassador with the UN Habitat for a while. And that was my main sort of campaign and push, which is that we can't really talk about social development without talking about education. That's the seed by which everything grows. So if we're really talking about policies and we're talking about things that we want to introduce and sort of improvements in urbanization and so on, there's no way we can have that discussion outside of reforming the education to make sure they can support those changes on the long run. And my frustration is a lot of the times that people are not willing enough to have that conversation, because that is in some ways a long-term goal that people are not willing to wait for. However, for me, it's essential. You just cannot achieve sustainable change without addressing the education system, which has led me to believe that there also is not that discussion for a reason, actually, I would say, because I don't think everybody's stupid enough to realize that, oh, we didn't realize that. For me, I think there is also some kind of conscious avoidance of that because of the fact it actually would ensure a certain level of sustainable change, which would see a different hand for Africa, I think.
What is your perception of the education system in Gambia?
They're kind of two different discussions, because the education system in Gambia has obviously a lot of things which we need to work on to develop. However, I kind of try to sidestep that a little bit, because I find that's a little bit of an unnecessarily small conversation to have, and I feel that it's again falling into the trap of trying to improve a broken tree, right? Yeah. For me, the system itself is not working, and it's something that I want to uproot and start again. Not just about the Gambia, I'm talking about across the continent. And this is where, for me, these are education systems in plural, not just the Gambia, but across the continent, that have been rooted and implemented during a time in African history that was not there to empower, is there to disempower Africans, right? It was implemented during colonial times. And so for me now, for us to talk about improving education, we need to start rewriting an education system that was not founded in that origin. It was founded in a system that was there to actually now start to consider who it's teaching, which is African kids, African people, the next generation Africans, and how they're going to actually be equipped with the tools to survive and to thrive within their own continent. That's a whole different story.
What does it take for a youth to come and join your academy, and what are they armed with once they leave the academy?
So right now, I'm hoping to be soon into expansion mode, which will allow me to start taking on students at higher numbers. What has been very, very important to me, which has been frustrating on the one hand for me, because obviously, everywhere you go, you just meet people. I want to take them, they want to come in. It's as you can imagine, it's one of those. But at the moment, I have had to force to stay in a very small number, because we are still developing a curriculum. And the one reason that I'm sort of keeping that thought at bay is I know that once it's ready, we'll be able to scale at a faster rate, and we'll be able to help more people than we can at this moment. So if we skip that stage, we'll only fall on our noses early, right? So for me, it's very important that I sort of keep those numbers down and make sure that I can fulfill the criteria I need to fulfill to make sure that curriculum can be implemented in other schools. So I'm not looking to create the Gambia's best institution or Africa's best institution. I'm trying to create a curriculum that can be implemented across every school, every country, wherever it's applicable. So in doing that, like I said, I've got to be able to go through that process, collect the data, be able to prove what's possible in what length of time, what those changes are, and how those changes have been able to take place. And that gives me a viable model to be able to scale out to other places.
And what is your perception about youth culture in Gambia? You're working with a lot of youth, of course, with your school and everything else. What you've done is to empower youths. That's what your school is doing. How do you see our youth at the moment? Because obviously we had this back way phenomenon that was going on for years, and youth are taking the back way, and they feel like there's no hope. There's not much for them to do in the Gambia. What is your perception on that? What would you say to that youth who's thinking, I might take the next boat, go across the Atlantic to go for a better life?
My perception is in two ways. My first one is that I understand, like, fully. I get it, and it makes sense. Unfortunately, as much as I want to fight against it, it actually makes sense. My my head of department in the arts and in curriculum at the academy was one of those young people who was going to take the back way. But I was able to provide an avenue for him to see that he could have a life within the Gambia that could support him and allow him to be able to grow and flourish within the country. So for me, although I can understand the predicament, for me, this is why I fight hard, because I see that it's our responsibility, those who can make a difference, and I say our collectively, right? Whoever can make a difference, to actually take that as their responsibility, to actually make sure that there's a framework for that youth, that generation, to be able to plug into. If there's no plug, they can't plug. They've got to plug somewhere, and if they can't plug in the country, they're going to plug somewhere else, and they're going to die trying. That's just the human nature of survival. So for me, it makes total sense. But for me, it speaks not to the youth, it speaks to the fact the country failing. It's failing to provide a plug for these youth, and who are actually going to be the future generation of this country, and actually have all the energy, have all the, the human manpower, which is what it takes to develop a country. They have it in their hands, and yet for me, they're literally trying to do anything they can to run away. That's a reflection of what we're doing wrong, not something that they're doing wrong.
Social media has been very prominent in our lives, and we can see how young girls look up to women like yourselves and other women as well. And one thing that I love and absolutely adore about you is how you're your authentic self. I love how you've embraced the African culture. It's not all about, we live in a world of the plastic fantastic, so to speak. What would you advise? And there has become this phenomenon about young women thinking there is a certain perception to how you should look, what beauty is, what the standards of beauty are. What would you advise to that young woman who's sitting there seeing a Kim Kardashian and thinking, I'm off to Turkey now. This is what beauty is. This is what the standard is.
A powerful and deep question, because there's actually one of the songs on the new album which addresses this in some way, which is talking about the power of how we view ourselves as people of African descent, either in or outside Africa. It's pretty much the same. How we view ourselves is the starting point. And unfortunately, that befalls the woman more than the man, because of the pressures of society in general towards women to look a particular way, and whatever that look is. Again, I find that society is accountable for that, because anybody who grows up obviously is a product of their environment, unless there's something wrong with them, right? It's normal and it's natural and it's supposed to be. They look around what they see, and what they see is successful. That's something that's implanted into their heads. And so for me, even in the Gambia, again, it frustrates me that there's not enough conscious push put into that, where I see even just billboards and advertisements. I think it's the same look every single time. There has to be conscious decisions made into stopping this, right? And so at the academy, for example, we have to do, I do a lot of that sensitization, but it's not through conversations, again, because kids don't learn from what you tell them. They learn from what they see and what they hear. And so for me, again, putting them in an environment where for them, seeing African faces, seeing beautiful African women who are successful models from around the world at every stage of their corner that they turn. So when I actually build my final campus, I've always, a huge, massive part of my campus is not just what we teach, but the environment. So the whole environment is going to speak to the child. You're going to walk down corridors and you'll be lined on both sides with successful Africans from around the world, from day what to now. And so that imagery for me is, we don't have to talk about it. It just becomes normal for them. And even without me being able to do that yet, because I haven't got that long corridor yet, we're building it. But when I do, until then, it's still having an impact, because this is something that we expose them to regularly. And where, unfortunately, I had, for example, when some years ago, when my students were younger, one of them, who's incidentally one of the darkest students in the school, she came to me. I was really glad that she did, because a lot of them, may not talk about it. But again, it's useful and important to build up bonds with the students where they feel that they can actually talk to you honestly. And she expressed that if she could pray for one thing, it would be to change her skin. And for me, that was the feeling I have, obviously, and the start for me that, this is something that is so deep rooted. And at this young age, she's around 11, this is already implanted so strongly into her mind that it's not a question. It's already a prayer, right? It's to me, she's already made a conclusion at age 11, So for me now, I'm like, right, this is now something that we have to work on actively and consciously and make sure that it's at the front of our imagery at every juncture that we can, which is verifying the fact that there's diversity in what we will call beautiful. It doesn't mean that people who are light skinned are not beautiful, but it means that we have a diversity in what it is we consider is beautiful, because it's subjective. It's totally subjective, right?
Yeah,
so for me, this process, and what I'm so proud of now is, this is like maybe about 5 years later now, she's the lead campaigner of everybody. So anybody that comes into that school, and we've had new kids coming in, you always knew they're new because they're the ones who like to take the bleach out, right? And she's the first one that will be telling them, do not do that to your skin. This is what you were born with. This is what God gifted you with, right? And so what I found empowering to me, again, this is not through lectures. This is not through sitting down and telling her it's wrong. This is through her just absorbing her environment and taking in and understanding what it means to be African. And I always say, simply being proud. That's all it is. And if you have an education system that teaches them every day to be proud, because we teach African history, we teach African culture, the languages, the music, there's a whole experience that they experience which is totally sucked out of the mainstream education. That gives them this verification for their own identity, where they're like, wow, we were one of the first people to have an empire on this planet. We were the first people to conquer here on this planet, and this guy was darker than me, right? When you expose them to this, and this just becomes normal part of history, it doesn't now become wow, because I often say the problem is, why are you saying wow? You know what I mean? When we talk about anybody who conquers the world and they're not black, we don't say wow. We're like, okay, but why do we have to say wow? That's amazing. Wow that we have culture, wow that we have monuments, wow that we built buildings, BC. These are not things that should be wow. They should just be information that you learn. But the fact we're still saying wow shows we still undervalue what Africans are capable of. So this for me is what I talk about education reform. Don't stop me because I'll keep going. Education reform. So for kids and for young girls, just to address your question now, this is some of the things that they have to be exposed to have self-worth, that they have to be exposed to in order to know and to verify their own identity. Children are extremely impressionable, so we have to expose them to the right things from day one.
It's just amazing to hear all these great things and great ideas that you have. But one thing I'd like to know is, who inspires Sona?
I would need a book. I'm lucky that I've had so many amazing encounters in my life. I think that's the privilege of being able to be born into a family that already is in the industry that I'm working in, and obviously being able to be around people who are literally amazing at what they do. It kind of depends, because obviously in the music sector, like I said, I've been spoiled because I've been able to be around. I mean, even just talking about my dad or my brother, you know what I mean? These are experts in their field. So I've been spoiled for choice in that area. But in terms of like the education as well, I think, I read a lot. I've read so much over the years that I studied. I studied African history and linguistics at university as well. So those were the years that I really took that seriously and went into South African history. I went into so much areas that was sort of, I was always hungry for knowledge, hungry to know more about the continent. And being at SOAS University was also very inspirational, because I think that was where I kind of realized I knew I wanted to do something in education in Africa, but that's where I kind of really sort of consolidated my feelings and my ideas. My head of department at the time was from Nigeria, and he also encouraged me a lot because he'd been doing it. And that kind of when I realized, you know what, we've got institutions in the UK, for example. I was in SOAS library almost every single day, and I was reading books about my grandfather, right? And there's recordings of my grandfather, transcripts of him, that my family don't have any access to. They never have. And yet it's in UK library, and they won't even be able to get a passport to come and read it, right? So something isn't right here. Something isn't ringing right for me. So I'm like, the first thing I'm like is, we need libraries in Africa to make sure that everybody have access to that, because being cut off from your history is another form, a huge weapon of control. And that's another thing I talk about a lot. A weapon of control is cutting people off from their identity, because when you don't have an identity, you have no self-worth, and when you have no self-worth, you can't succeed, right? So this is something which I kind of, that whole idea of bringing an institution to Africa was consolidated during the time of university in the UK.
Also, Sona, I've noticed that you've got an album coming up.
I'm really happy to say that, because it's been 11 years since the last one. So I'm like, yes, it's been 11 years, but it has not been an idle 11 years, as you can hear. I've been doing a lot, especially with the academy and with touring and all the rest. It's been no time. to actually start and to really finish a new one. Finally, it's done. So this album for me is my contribution. I see it's not just an album. Me as an artist is not just about me and music. It's everything I do, I feel, is a contribution. It's what am I going to leave behind? What can continue to serve people in some way, in years to come. So this album is my contribution in that sense. The topics on the album are very pertinent to what I represent and the things that I want to address and make people to think about, not just in the Gambia or in Africa, but also worldwide. What is that accountability on these areas, whether it's to do with youth, like we mentioned, there's a song about youth, or whether it's to do with women, or whether it's to do with identity, or whether it's to do with education. All of these areas that are very important to me, these are things that I've addressed on this album one by one. So I think this is an important thing for me, just to make this my clear statement to the world. What are the things that I represent?
Would there be any future collaborations with any Gambian artists? Are you thinking of it?
That's my next thing. I was actually just talking about it a few days ago with a good friend of mine. Because now the album is out. It's been something that's been pressing on me for years, but obviously I've just not been able to. I can't, until I've done this album, I can't talk about it, can't think about it. Yes, 100%. My next stop is I really want to make sure I can get that one done some point next year.
And also, Sona, another thing that I wanted to ask you, it's with regards to Gambian music. At the moment, you've got people like Jizzle, ST. They've kind of like brought their own thing to it, What are your thoughts on that?
This is the collective. When I say I, it's we, and it is very much about a collective effort. I think for me as well, there's been a lot of conversations around Gambian music and how, not music, but let's say the industry, Gambian music industry and the industry, and how does it sort of grow and sort of improve. I think for me now, with the type of art, what I like to see is people just going for the bar, you know what I mean? Just continue aiming high, and that's what's so encouraging and inspiring for me, which is why, like I said, I really want to make sure that I can collaborate with someone also at that level soon. But it's also demonstrating, just like anything, to others around them that yes, you basically just need to keep aiming high, right? And the one thing I want to start seeing more of is getting artists to be drawing audiences from different nationalities. That's very important as well, because the Gambian crowd is there for people and there to support, but when they come abroad, I need to see that there's also that level of support from other nationalities around. And if they come to the UK, I want to see a British audience, right? If they go to France, I want to see French people coming and celebrating and knowing about what Gambia has to offer. So again, that's a collective move that we all have to be, and what you're doing here, exposing people, we all have a role to play in our industries to be able to help make that possible. So yeah, I hope to see that happening more.
And how's the touring going? I know you've been touring Europe and America.
It's ridiculously tiring. It's making me think of what it means to retire early, but no, it's good. It's incredibly draining, but it is amazing just to see the support from around the world. It's sometimes you're so in it that you don't have time to step back from it, but sometimes you do. Those moments where I kind of just come off the mic and I've got the crowd and they're all just singing, and there's those moments where I kind of just look out there and I think, none of you guys even know what you're singing. None of you guys have some of you have never even experienced African music much before. And I just think this is really it, because I remember saying once when I was younger, again, in university, I was like, one day I wonder if that thing about language, and the fact that we always default to English and Portuguese and German and whatever, all the colonial languages, of course, because that's what's been drilled into our minds. Well, what if you see these English or whatever, not even English, but artists from abroad coming to Africa and everybody's singing all the lyrics in English. A lot of them don't speak English, but they all sing it, and that's totally normal, right? We don't bat an eyelid. But imagine if an African artist and got the whole crowd to be singing in an African language, and none of them, and they're all Europeans. Whatever that would happen. And so for me, those are the moments I step back and realize it's happening. It's happening. I've got the whole crowd singing something in a language they don't speak, but it's an African language. And when I did the Beast movie, that's why I chose to sing in Zulu. Half the song is in Zulu, because I wanted to raise awareness of, like, we have so many languages in Africa. You would never be able to understand how many languages we have, and yet we never think about it. And again, it's that thing of scratch your head. Like, you sang in Zulu. my thing is, again, your reaction is telling me why I do it, because why are you scratching your head and looking confused? You know, you guys sing in English, you sing in French, you sing in all these other languages that are less connected to you, but we don't sing in each other's languages. And you think if you don't speak it, you can't sing it. You can, right? We should, because that's normal. We're celebrating what we have to offer on the continent, and I think it's hugely powerful for South Africans to hear somebody from all the way up in West Africa who took the time to try to sing in their language and to relate to them and to celebrate their culture as well. That's very, very empowering, I believe.
You have written a song for the movie, which is called Dunia. Tell us about that. How did that come about?
So this was born out of the fact that the director of the film was already a follower of my music from before this project. And that's what opened the door initially to have me on board to sing as a singer on the film. So I was invited to do vocals on a couple of sessions with the film composer. Then out of that, when they had that material back, they were like, okay, they want me to do more. And from there came the conversation about me writing the credit song. So the film credits, I will write the song for that, which I then spoke to the director, and he kind of gave me very clear sort of directions, in the sense that he wants it basically to be my sound, which is, I find interesting, because I don't know, people often ask what is it that I do, and I just think, well, I think I'm the worst person to say that. I just do what I do, and then everybody else explains it, and I say, okay, is that what it is? Okay. So for him, he said, you know, the main thing that he wants is, he wants it to sound identifiably African in that stamp. The film is set in Africa, in South Africa, so that's a huge major part of it. But importantly, this film, as we know, as a Hollywood movie, is going all around the world. It's having huge numbers of people who have no idea about anything to do with African music. So he needs it to be accessible. He wants it to be catchy. He wants it to be something that no matter who you are, where you're from, or in the world, you can get it. You can understand it. It doesn't sound too foreign. So that's kind of what he felt my music in general is. It has the African identity, but it's also understandable by your audiences from around the world. So that was kind of my target. So that's what I went into the film to try to do and try to achieve.
I listened to the song, and I think you absolutely achieved it, because the first note, it just gave me goosebumps. It was absolutely amazing. Congratulations. You've absolutely made us proud. It's been absolutely lovely, but before you go, because I do want to read a couple of messages that I've taken from social media, some that have been sent to me as well, with regards to what you're doing and how proud Gambians are for what you've achieved and what you've done for us. I've got Baba Galeba saying, so great, Sona, you are the best female artist in West Africa. And I've also got someone saying, blessed and more blessings to you. Absolutely amazing Gambian sister, Sona Jobateh. Keep it up. The sky is the limit. You are on track, and the whole country is proud of you. Sona, we are absolutely proud of you. Thank you for taking us along wherever you go. Thank you for representing us. Thank you for flying our flag. And thank you for coming onto our platform, Muso Media House. Africa has definitely got the greatest artist of our time, Sona Jobateh.
For the perfect holiday in the Gambia, you need a perfect location to call home whilst here. Well, look no further. Bougainville offers short stays for an affordable price that won't take away from other holiday expenses. Either take a single room whilst holidaying on your own, or enjoy a fully furnished premium accommodation with the entire family. Enjoy free Wi-Fi, fully air-conditioned rooms, a spacious outdoor for barbecue and entertainment, plus swimming pool to top it off, with extra added facilities facilities, local amenities, and 24 hours security. Bougainvillea is a spacious, self-catering accommodation with a fully equipped modern kitchen, giving you a home away from home experience. Choose Bougainvillea for the best holiday experience next to the sandy beaches of the smiling coast of the Gambia. Located right at the heart of Brufut with an easy access to the main highway. Contact Almo Real Estate today for bookings and reservation.